Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're talking about Season 2 of Severance on Apple TV+, which has been one of the best shows on TV, but with the Season 2 finale just being released, I think I can confidently say that this is the best show on TV, and it's not even close. Severance was created by Dan Erickson and Ben Stiller, with Stiller acting as the director of this episode. It of course stars Adam Scott, Britt, Tramell, Tillman, Zach Cherry, Jen Tullock, Patricia, Arquette, and so many other talented cast members that fill out this ensemble. But we're not here to list out all the creatives behind the show, which honestly, if I were to, I could literally go on forever as there's so many talented creatives working on this series, both in front and behind the camera. The real reason we are here though is to talk about the finale and the season as a whole, which has been a roller coaster. So if you haven't had a chance to watch this show, please do yourself a favor and check it out, because I am going to be digging into spoilers for this finale, which you do not want to have ruined for you. So for those of you who have seen the episode, let's just jump right into it. This season of Severance has been building up to the eventual rescue of Gemma, who has been held captive at Lumen for several years as a test subject of Cold Harbor, the mystery of which we still don't fully have answers to, but I have many thoughts on what it can be when I get into some theories later on. But as for an arc for a season of television, I think it worked extremely well. Season 1 does a fantastic job at setting the stage for what Lumen does on a day-to-day basis, the mundanity of an office job with a great sci-fi concept that is the severance procedure at the center of that mystery. That season told the story of the innies attempting to get their story told, essentially, to let the people on the outside world know that what they experience inside of Lumen is not what they say it is, that they deserve as much as a life as their Audis enjoy. And as a result, Marc's Audi finds out that his wife, who was supposedly killed in a car accident, is actually alive, and that set the stage for this season's arc. So building off of that, we get a season filled with an even more direct look at the existence of innies and their right to exist as a whole person. We dealt with the death of an innie this season, with Irving, played excellently by John Turturro, essentially sacrificing himself to reveal that Helena was posing as HELLY during the first few episodes of this season. Seeing our core 4 cut into 3 was absolutely devastating, and the mourning of a friend was really impactful. And honestly, if we never get to see any Irving ever again, I think that would probably be for the best, because I think that would make that impact and that quote-unquote death in this series just that much more impactful. Dylan in particular was hit very hard by Irving's death, with him going essentially on a season-long arc of him contemplating whether or not he wants to end his own existence as an innie. I love the scenes with him and his Audi's wife as she was able to see a side of her husband she had never seen before, or at least hadn't seen in a very long time, as their outer marriage had been strained for so long. This sparked so many complicated ideas about relationships within these severed employees. If his wife kissed this innie version of Dylan, is she cheating on his Audi? Dylan's response to his innie's resignation request was great, giving us some hope that he could possibly mend a relationship with his wife and giving the innie the true decision of quitting at Lumen. But what's even more complicated than that has been the relationship between Marc S. and HELLY, which has gone through so much this season, from Helena catfishing Marc at the beginning of this season, to Marc and HELLY solidifying their love for each other despite all that Helena did at the midpoint of this season, to the heartbreaking decision of Marc S. in this episode in choosing HELLY and his existence as an innie over Gemma and the promise of integration. There's just so much to get into with this. I honestly really do wish that I did weekly videos on this show, because there's just so much in here. So let's just try to focus on the finale itself now, starting with the great conversation between Marc S. and Marc. What I really loved about the dilemma for these characters is that it highlights the genuine misunderstanding that Audis have for their innies. The conversation starts off as a calm back and forth about the plan to rescue Gemma, until it quickly devolves into a shouting match between the two. Marc is desperate to get his wife back, which is so understandable, especially after episode 7 of this season, which highlighted the relationship between Marc and Gemma, the tragedy that was the miscarriage and the distance put between them due to this heartbreaking event. It being shot on film, completely contrasting this relationship stylistically from the more cold and sterile look and digital look of the Lumen office, was brilliant. But on the other hand, we spent much more time investing ourselves into Marc S. and his experiences in the severed floor. If he were to go through with Marc's plan to get Gemma out and for the reintegration process to be completed, will he really still exist? Does that make his relationship with HELLY null and void? Is one person's love more worthy of existing than the others?
What do you want from me? We are in this together. Can't you just trust me? No.
it was a debate between these two characters that I wasn't expecting for the show to get into, but one that I honestly found myself thinking of throughout the entirety of the season. As soon as Marc started going through with the reintegration process, as soon as he made that decision, I honestly feared the loss of a character that I came to really love in Marc S. I thought that in an instant that version of this character would cease to exist and that a new character would essentially be born, and I'm so glad that that was not the case, because it's the fight in both Marc S and HELLY that makes them so easy to attach onto with their characters and their stories. Marc S threatening to not save GEMMA if the next thing he saw wasn't the severed floor was such a smart writing choice, because throughout the season we've basically been through the perspective of Marc rather than Marc S, and this brought the perspective right back to that character, which has been the heart of the show this whole time. So now we are back on the severed floor, which had more terrifying cult-like paintings and statues and weird speeches from an animatronic KIER that genuinely creeped me out. As soon as Marc S finished Cold Harbor, GEMMA was moved to the final stage of her testing, and Marc S and HELLY were treated with Mr. MILCHICK and a robot KIER giving subtle jabs at each other, which was absolutely fantastic.
No. I mean this wax statue that's 5 inches taller than you actually were.
Then we get another beautiful sequence of Tramell Tillman tearing up the dance floor as he did before with Defiant Jazz. This time we had the choreography and merriment department come in with a full marching band to celebrate the completion of the 25th file. Speaking of which, we did get some answers from COBEL about what MDR has been up to when they were finding these files every single time. Every time Marc and his team completed one of these files, it essentially created a new innie for GEMMA to be tested on, essentially going through all these different rooms to see essentially if her severed mind would break at any given point, snapping her back to being GEMMA. COBEL also said that as soon as Cold Harbor was finished, they'd have to be very quick to get to GEMMA before she's killed in the final test, which I have plenty of more theories on what that would be and what that means in a bit here. At this point, HELLY traps MILCHICK inside of the bathroom to cause a distraction in order for Marc to run and find the dark hallway leading to the testing floor. At the same time, Mr. Drummond is doing some weird animal sacrifice with the goat lady across the hall. When he hears Marc trying to break into the room, a fight breaks out leading to the payoff with the goat lady, finally helping Marc capture Drummond. Then one of the most shocking moments in the entire show happens. As the elevator goes down and Marc S swaps back to Marc in the elevator, he tenses up and pulls the trigger on the gun, killing Drummond. Genuinely one of the most shocking moments inside of this entire series. We then get the reunion between Marc and GEMMA, which I thought was absolutely beautiful. Again, episode 7 was really needed to work as well as it did, because this reunion wouldn't have been nearly as satisfying as it was without that backstory. And that brings us to the fateful decision at the stairwell, with Marc S guiding GEMMA to freedom, but contemplating whether or not to let his Audi join her. Him staying with HELLY in this moment confirmed his stance on wanting to simply exist, which I think lays the groundwork for what season 3 will be. Season 1 was the story of Marc S realizing that there was more to his existence than what Lumen said. He learns from HELLY that he deserves to live and to be seen as a whole person. Season 2 is the story of Audi Marc fighting to get his life back to where it was before Lumen, to rescue his wife and to reintegrate his mind to be whole again. Season 3 in my eyes will have to be then about Marc S and Marc fighting to get what they want, which are inherently conflicting motivations, which was only solidified by Marc S making his decision to stay on the severed floor at the end of this episode. The creative choice to also transition at this stage from shooting to digital to shooting on film for that final shot solidifies the love between Marc S and HELLY, that they deserve to run off with each other just as much as Audi Marc and GEMMA deserve to return to their former life together. It's just such a well-written show with an incredible arc for both of these characters that always stayed unpredictable and thrilling to the very end. So let's get into some theories that I have for season 3 and what Lumen is truly up to, because we learned a lot this season, from Miss COBEL being the inventor of the severance procedure to the cult-like behavior that Lumen constantly exhibits. COBEL formed this idea after being a victim of child labor in a factory, which was then stolen by the EAGANs for their own nefarious reasons. Based on what we've seen the EAGANs use this procedure for, I think it's all to eliminate any sense of discomfort or inconvenience from their lives. They don't want to experience the pain of childbirth, so therefore they made these cabins in which their innies only exist to experience childbirth, which is absolutely mortifying. One of GEMMA's testing rooms was simply her writing Christmas letters over and over again, which might just them not wanting to experience something that mundane or boring. Another is a dentist's office, so they don't have to experience the pain and discomfort you get from going to one of those visits. The plane crash simulator is for them to not have to experience the fear that you get before you die. I think that the end goal for Lumen is to sell the idea that they can pass off any unwanted feelings to an innie who they see as subhuman. Just imagine that you're about to get into a car accident, but the chip automatically triggers. You don't feel the impact, your innie does, and you'll simply wake up without any of the trauma or discomfort because it's all passed on to your innie. It is truly despicable to think about, but it explains a lot of what we've seen in both seasons, along with why they treat their severed employees the way that they do, because they simply don't see them as human. And as I said before, the fight to dismantle Lumen is not so easy, and in doing so, it would end the lives of all of the innies. That's why the doctor yelled to Marc in the elevator saying that freeing Gemma and revealing the truth about her being held captive by this company would kill them all, because the death of Lumen would also mean the death of all the innies that we spent so much time proving have their own souls. So my question for future seasons is, how do we win? How can there be a happy ending for both the outies and the innies? Or does someone have to lose in order for justice to be had? How does the story end for Mark S and for Marc? And is there some compromise or middle ground to be had at all? All great questions to leave the audience as they impatiently wait for future seasons. I cannot wait for season 3. But with all that being said, I do have some criticisms for this season, as nothing is perfect. I know that a lot of people didn't like the COBEL bottle episode, which I don't fully agree with. I think we learned some really interesting stuff that recontextualizes her motivations from the previous season. But I think the real issue is that when a show like this has a bottle episode in that particular placement in the season, it really throws off the momentum of the story. I think that in general, the pacing of the season was great. Every episode felt necessary with new information, new answers, new questions. And yes, this does include the COBEL episode, but to me, when you compare this story to the momentum of the previous season, I think that this one falls short because of that episode. Season 1 did a great job at showing both Marc's journeys simultaneously without the audience ever getting lost. Every time Marc S walked out of that elevator, you knew exactly what the last thing he experienced was. This season has some gaps in Marc S's story that did throw me off a bit. After the reintegration process and his bloody nose in episode 6, I believe, we don't really see any Marc until the very end of episode 9, leaving me to have to really think about when the last time we saw him was. Episode 7 was mainly the flashback episode with Outie Marc, which was phenomenal, by the way. It might be my favorite episode of the season, but because we didn't see any Marc at all in that episode, and we didn't see Marc at all in episode 8, it made it just feel like it had been forever since we had seen him. And so, although I am a defender of the content of episode 8, I do think that the momentum of the show was affected a bit by this. And on top of all that, after IRVING's sacrifice, I wasn't that invested in his storyline outside of Lumen. I always like seeing John Turturro and Christopher Walken on screen, but I think I need a rewatch to fully understand what their roles here mean for the larger picture. I think IRVING's Outie was investigating Lumen, and Walken had something to do with the disappearances of people like Gemma. Him leading IRVING to the train station and having him leave town was probably to prevent the same fates from happening to him, but I'm not entirely sure. Hopefully we see these storylines converge with the A-plots of the series a bit more next season. I also hope that we get more Natalie and MILCHICK interactions next season. I love the subtle understanding that they have for one another as the two black employees at Lumen and the paintings they received from the company. I can see MILCHICK starting to crack in his loyalty for the company, and I hope to see his life outside of Lumen a bit more, because why is he working for Lumen? I understand why COBEL was there, as she was, trying to stay close with the technology that was stolen from her, but what's the deal with MILCHICK? I'm very curious to see his life outside of Lumen, and honestly, just every second that we get with Tramell Tillman on screen was an absolute treat, so I could always use more of him.
Fuck you, Mr. MILCHICK.
But those are just going to be my thoughts on Season 2 of Severance. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on the season as a whole and any theories you may have for Season 3 in the comment section down below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this. I've been uploading weekly reviews for Daredevil Born Again, which I am very much enjoying, and I'll have a review out for Death of a Unicorn next week as well. So thanks everybody for watching this video, and I hope to see you all in my next one.